The galaxy burns. The heretic falls. And the Emperor protects. Welcome, Imperial citizens, to The Emperor Protects, your Horus Heresy podcast, where we go into the lore and ask all kinds of questions. My name is Doug with 2+ Stuff, and I am joined by my co-host, Dan. How you doing, Dan?
Doing great, my friend, and you're doing well?
Yes. If you guys have been curious as to why we were out for so long, COVID came to my house and just absolutely tore havoc. So my wife and I are just kind of getting back in the saddle with our respective work, and I'm very excited to be behind a microphone again.
No, it's great to be here with you. So
yeah, absolutely. Now, this episode is going to be a little bit different from our previous ones. You see, up till now, we have been going book by book as we kind of shotgun blast around the various theaters of war for the Horus Heresy. We did the Betrayal at Calth kind of story. We've done... the assault on Prospero, those kinds of things. But this episode, we're going to step back a little bit and just have a discussion. And I think, and I certainly hope that it's interesting for everybody. Dan, you threw me a document that was like comparing and contrasting Legion personalities. And I was like, oh, this is so much fun. We got to just talk about it. Like, let's just take a day and just chat.
Great, sure.
And so, yeah, our topics today, we have two of them. The first one is going to be a definitive chat on the Space Wolves and Thousand Sons, who was right, quote unquote, quotes around the word right with Prospero.
Yes.
And then the second one is Heresy Buddies. We're going to compare and contrast legions because that's just really fun to do. There's a lot of great foils that the writers have put together. But right here, before we get into that, I wanted to ask, do you have any hobby progress, or you were telling me about a book that you just recently listened to and wanted to chat about?
Yeah, it's the new, it's not one of the big books in the Siege of Terra series. It is one of the novellas. Graham McNeil wrote a couple already. This one is called Garrow, Knight of Grey. And it is, first of all, I would highly recommend that if you have not listened to Flight of the Eisenstein or read the Garrow book, that you do so, because a lot of stuff in this newest Garrow book there's a lot of context that you lose if you don't have those other stories.
Yeah.
You just will not know what he's talking about or what Mortarion is in this he's talking about. But it is just an unbelievable story by James Swallow, and he's kind of the Garrow guy. He's written the Garrow stories, so highly recommended. But also that you do that kind of homework before.
Yeah,
and it's good homework. It's enjoyable stuff. It's something you want to do.
Oh yeah, but yeah. We mentioned Fly the Eisenstein being probably my favorite of the first early Horus Heresy books, because it's just a roller coaster. I mean, and that's just Garrow's life. It just doesn't stop.
Yeah. And all the short stories in the book Garrow kind of, track his life and his life as a Marine. So it really, really was good. And so I'm going to recommend it on my own show as well again, and encourage people to give it a listen. So
absolutely. Yeah. Okay. That's fantastic. For me, I kind of took a break from Black Library books just while I was sick and was just listening to history, basically learning all about World War I. So I don't have a whole lot to offer here now, but
okay. Nice.
As far as listener mail goes, we actually do have a question today. And if you would like to ask us a question, feel free to address either, you have Dan's outlet, which is Cubic Shenanigans, the podcast. And I have my YouTube channel. You can leave comments here or go onto my Discord in the show notes and ask questions there. But this one comes from YouTube. It's by author DW, and I'm going to let you take the reins on this one here. I'm going to ask it for you. So, question for the next video on Loyalists, which is pertinent to today. I don't know much about 30K or 40K, but I hear that the Emperor actively discouraged worship of him, and in 40K, that is totally lost. Are there any chapters or companies who respect that aspect, or are they all fanatical cultists at heart?
That's an excellent question. I think we're going to address that, I think, a little bit, because one of the compare and contrast things we talk about in here is heresy zealots. So to the writer of the question, I think we're going to address that a little bit in terms of 30K. In terms of 40K, I think it's really interesting that most of the Space Marine chapters, the Loyalists, because obviously the Heresy chapters don't care about any of that, but the Loyalist chapters, it's funny that even though there's the Imperial Creed and there's the worship of the Emperor in 40K, most Space Marine chapters don't really want anything to do with that.
Yep.
They're really not. They kind of tolerate it, I would say, Doug, more than participate in it. And in the Indomitus era now that we're in 40K, 41K, I guess. Mm-hmm. Even Guilliman is struggling with the whole worship the Emperor thing. Yeah, he is struggling mightily. And when you listen to the 3 books that were written about him, he just doesn't know what to do. So,
and I have to say that was actually some of the most compelling 40K lore that's come out to me personally in the last several years. I mean, I love the Heresy stuff, but I felt like 40K had gotten stagnant. But there's a speech by Guilliman when he first comes back and like sits in front of the Emperor, and he's just like, "Look at what they did to our dream." And I was like, "Oh, that's so sad." That's so sad.
Yes.
Oh true. Man.
Oh, that's so true.
And I was just that blew me away. So like it's complicated. Everyone deals with their relationship to the Emperor. I would say it's definitely not the same kind of religious zeal that we experience today. When we talk about commonly the concept of God, it's not quite the same, because the Emperor is like, the whole point is that he's sitting in his chair overwatching humanity right now. Like, he's a very present, active deity on Terra watching you, as opposed to someone in the sky, depending on your religion. And so
right.
It's just a very interesting topic. And like I said, yeah, we're going to get into that more specifically when we talk about Imperial Fists and some other legions. So hang in there, DW. We'll get to that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And in the meantime, Dan and I have one little announcement here. We're going to talk all about it. And that is that you and I are running an event at Adepticon. Would you like to chat about that?
Sure. We're running the Age of Sigmar Youngbloods event. And it's, for younger people who are interested in the hobby. They're not quite ready to jump into the mega tournament with 200 plus people in it. Yep. And we tried to set it up so that it's not only competitive, because we tried to keep that piece of it where it is a game, there are winners, but we also tried to add some elements that are going to make it fun to play and make you want to come back again and again to play the game. So
yeah, essentially it's an Age of Sigmar tournament on Sunday at Adepticon for players 14 and younger. There is a 40K version that's already sold out, y'all, and we have 5 out of our 16 spots?
Yes.
Sold, and we want to at least get that to 10. So I made the joke before, and Dan wanted me to say it. If you don't do it for us, do it for yourself and the mimosa that you get to drink on Sunday and recover while we're watching your freaking kids.
Absolutely.
Like, treat yourself at Adepticon. So, but basically, yeah, it's a simplified format where we use the core rules of the game and whatever battle tome or army book you have, and really that's about it. We don't worry about the GHBs. The missions are custom made and come with the packet. It's a whole bunch of great stuff, and it's just meant to be very light and also introduce kind of the next generation to tournaments and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So awesome. Go ahead and check out my YouTube channel. Has a whole breakdown of the pack and how it plays and what the goals are of the missions and that kind of stuff. So please go check that out. I will try to remember to leave a link in the description directly to that video down below.
Great. Yeah. Good stuff.
With that out of the way, I think we're ready to start diving into our main topics.
Yes.
And the first one we have here, Space Wolves or Thousand Suns, choose ye now and why.
Okay.
And I threw down a few talking points just so like there's events that happen to both legions that we can kind of compare and contrast. But Dan, on the surface level, What do you think about the events surrounding Prospero and the overall tension between those two legions?
Yeah, I certainly am sympathetic to the Thousand Sons.
Yes.
I get that Magnus did what he did, but his legion was always loyal. They were loyal, in my opinion, of course. And by the way, Doug, I just wanted to drop that there are probably going to be a lot of hot takes in this discussion today.
Oh, yes. So, yes, this is a hot take episode. This is why we moved away from the books.
So I certainly sympathize with them.
Yeah.
And the fact that, and we just talked about this, how the Emperor just totally hosed these guys. I mean, they are psychers. That's what he made them to be, psychers, a legion of psychers. And he took that away from them. Like, I can't even imagine what that would be like. So I understand how they are just like, no, we're not going to play anymore, and take their football with them and go home. On the other hand, the Space Wolves, I think, are a much more complex, we've talked about this too, legion that a lot of people perceive them to be, and a lot of people in the story perceive them to be.
Yep.
And I think that, we just had this discussion about Prospero Burns. I think Leman Russ struggled and struggled and struggled up to the very last moment to attack Prospero and attack his brother Magnus. Mm-hmm. And to take sides is, to me, really difficult, other than if you already have some, pre-established favorite on either one of those. I had a 40K Thousand Sons army. I also had a 40K Space Wolves army. But I enjoy the Wolves and their canon more in terms of their origins and the Space Viking meme and those kind of things.
Yeah.
So I pick them because I think, again, opinion, that they were not this savage barbarian legion that just went, okay, we're there, boom, you ordered us, go, burn it to the ground. That really wasn't the story. So I think, in a way, the Emperor and Horus victimized Leman Russ and the Space Wolves. In some ways, the way the Thousand Sons were victimized by the Emperor. Oh, so that's my thought, and I'll take the Space Wolves for okay. My choice. What about you?
So I'm on Team Thousand Sons. Just throw it out there at the beginning. For me, I will say that the Prospero Burns book did probably the most that any singular book has done in terms of making the Space Wolves compelling, like their motivations and how they perceive things and their traditions and honor. Like, it just looks different, and I think it required that particular perspective to tell that story, and I think it was well done. That being said, I do feel like it's made abundantly clear that the Space Wolves are okay with the fact that they are made to hunt other legions. Like, and that's fine. Everyone has a job to do. But the problem is that the Thousand Sons' job is to take humanity to the next level. They were always a psychic-based legion who were supposed to be studying the esoteric and all these things. Like, they were designed with an aptitude, and the two are incompatible. And between the two of them, I go with the Thousand Sons, who are trying to push forward, albeit arrogantly, but in addition, like, try to, the whole discussion around these early books of the Heresy is what happens when there's no more war? What happens when humans win? And Space Wolves have no answer. Whereas I feel like the Thousand Sons are like, well, then we tackle the next challenge, and we do this and we do that. We push further. And like, there's an optimism there that is very rare in I guess, the 31st millennium at this point. And what I put note here in the notes for you is I'd rather face hard questions about morality based on the use of psychic powers than build an intergalactic empire on the hypocrisy surrounding those same abilities. So the Thousand Sons are all about like, yeah, we use the warp for everything. Why don't we master it? And then everyone else is like, whoa.
Sure.
It's our GPS device, but we don't want to go too crazy. And that's about it. And the details that the different books left out to me were very interesting. For example, they don't talk about psychic spies in the Thousand Sons book, which is a
No.
super dark note to think
Yes.
about.
Yeah.
But also, I love that they include all the auxiliary, like the human elements in the Space Wolves book, being like, I'm not working with those guys. Those guys are monsters.
Right. Right.
And when both books, more so with Thousand Sons than Space Wolves, went to the Council of Nicaea, that was a very interesting thing, because one of those approached it as a discussion. Thousand Sons initially came as a discussion, but everybody else was there thinking it was the trial of Magnus, and it's just like, oh, that's not good.
I would like, again, kind of to the credit of the Space Wolves, they were supportive of Magnus.
Yes.
Let's be clear of that. Again, which is part of that theme I talked about of Lehman Russ waiting and just not wanting to do what he was asked to do.
Yeah.
He just didn't think it was right. He had a huge moral dilemma when it came to doing in Prospero. So, yeah.
I guess, now
stuff.
that I think about it, I really see the argument, instead of being Space Wolves or Thousand Sons, I feel like it's more Thousand Sons versus the Emperor, and the Space Wolves were just the instrument of that.
Yeah, I think so in a lot of ways. And I think, we've talked about, we're going to talk about it here again today. It's another story of, the Space Wolves have been in the past and still are an incredibly independent legion, so much as you can be. And so I think that the decision, even though he was manipulated, I still think that Lehman Russ was incredibly introspective when it came to making the choice of whether or not he was going to do what he was told to do. He is, everybody, he's a loyal dog, and this kind of, that to me is just way too simplistic.
I would agree, and I think definitely a scene that shows that is when the Space Wolves were like being very abundantly clear about needing permission to do whatever it takes to win a war in the burning of Prospero. And I'm just like, right, because they need to cross all the T's because they understand the gravity of what they're doing. Like,
Yes.
It's not just, oh, now the Thousand Sons are bad, go get them. It's like, no, he understands. This is galactic civil war with space wizards. Like, he gets it.
This is not Agron and the World Eaters where it's just like, kill.
Yeah.
No.
Yep, exactly.
Anyway,
so we land on opposite ends of that, and that's totally fine. I mean, it's part of the fun of these
absolutely.
conversations.
Yeah,
right?
I think we're going to end up that way in a few of these, so that's great.
And we asked the question in our last one regarding the Thousand Sons: did Magnus do anything wrong? Yes. Did he have to?
Yes.
Well, yeah, kind of. Sometimes you got to do something wrong and you don't lose, or you can't win. That's what I mean.
Yeah. Right.
Oh man, I love it. I really appreciated the tonal change between those two books, because the Space Wolves one started so dark and chaotic with our protagonist's arrival on Fenris and this kind of thing.
Yep.
But whereas the Thousand Sons one was just much more sympathetic. I don't know. I thought it was a wonderful breakdown. Thank you for going through that with me.
No, it's you picked out a critical issue, that there is this tonal difference that's very significant between the two books. There's just no question.
Yeah.
No question.
All right, and we're going to move into kind of the main segment for today. Heresy Buddies, comparing and contrasting Legion personalities. So when we did our initial intro into Prospero, we were excited because this was our chance to start looking into legions more deeply, right? These books offer amazing perspectives for their respective legions, and we thought it was a good point to stop with the stories and then kind of like reflect on the legions as a whole. And because at this point we've covered a few different major theaters of war. We have the events on Calth, Prospero, the Istvan tragedy, all those kinds of things. So Dan put together this list of kind of grouping the various legions together, and I would love for you to run through these with me. We're just going to have a chat style with hot takes.
My first one was Heresy Hypocrites. So there's some little kind of cute verbiage here that I put together. So the Heresy Hypocrites, I listed the Dark Angels and the Death Guard. And to me, the Dark Angels are incredibly hypocritical, specifically Lionel Johnson. I will state from the beginning that I am an anti-fan. I cannot stand Johnson. Luther is the man. And once listeners, you get into the Dark Angels novels, you'll know what I'm talking about here. But I just, first of all, there was, and this is not in the Heresy, but it's definitely related very closely to this, there was a kind of a mini series in 40K called The Wrath of Magnus, and Magnus actually came back in his demon form and invaded Fenris once again.
Yep.
But there were Dark Angels, there were Space Wolves, and one of the things that the Dark Angels kind of found out about was the 13th Great Company. And for those who know, that is the company of the Space Wolves who have totally given over to the wolf gene, and they've literally become wolfen, is what they're called. And this is heretical. I mean, it's genetic deviancy. It's similar in many ways. We talk about how the Thousand Sons and the Space Wolves are different. Think about the genetic flaw that the Thousand Sons had.
Yeah,
where they turned into literally almost chaos spawn. That was a genetic flaw. The same thing with the Space Wolves. And they don't want people to know about it because Inquisition,
Yes, exactly.
But the Dark Angels, from the beginning, I mean, it is part of their canon, part of their culture to keep secrets. And Johnson was always such a hypocrite about this. And when the Dark Angels found out about the Space Wolves, were like, "Oh my gosh, you guys are, horrible people." And he won't even tell his own legion what's going on.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Not to mention not telling any other legions about the schism. His own legion revolted, and he doesn't want to tell anybody about it. This is what the Fallen are all about. And the other thing, there's another story where Johnson and Sanguinius are together, and Gilliman in the the Undiscovered Empire, the one where they thought the Emperor was dead. Yeah, right. And literally, Johnson made a promise to Sanguinius that he would not kill Kurz. He would not do it. He wanted to, but he would, put him in chains and bring him before Sanguinius, whatever. Man, when you read the book, you're going, "Oh my gosh, what a lying son of a..." He had no intention of not killing Kurz. It was his goal was to kill Conrad Kurz. And so the Dark Angels in general, Johnson in particular, are just so hypocritical and dishonest, I think, as a legion, and particularly him as a Primarch. So that's my thought on their part of hypocrisy.
I think that's wonderful. I'm gonna I made my own little document for everybody where I'm kind of like putting in my own little hot takes to Dan's thing, my rebuttal corner. Sure. My thing is I love those takes. I just also slipped in the Blood Angels and Space Wolves, Thousand Sons, all those guys, because they all knew something was terribly wrong. Like, on one hand, we're the custom-made hand of the Emperor for either dispatching legions or pushing humanity to the next level or being the defenders like the Blood Angels, and all of them are just like harboring the worst secrets. And you all are a bunch of losers.
Yeah.
This was you had failure written on all of you.
Yes. Yep.
Oh man, that's a good one. Okay. So go ahead.
What about the Death Guard? What are your thoughts on them as hypocrites? Because Mortarion.
Yeah, absolutely. So with Mortarion, so he voted no on the use of psychic powers, and as we now know as Demon Primarch, he's actually a pretty competent wizard, both on the table and in the lore.
Yes.
I think with their theme of like stoicism, with the Death Guard of just being imperturbable and moving forward and these implacable advances, I think it's interesting that the minute more power and a different kind of thing that he could be instantly good at was offered, Mortarion was like, yeah, I'll do that. That showed a weakness of character. How about that? I think that's probably a good one. I mean, I understand that what his men went through and why they turned to Plague Marines, but for Mortarion personally, it was a little bit different. I feel like he is certainly a hypocrite in that regard.
And it's funny that this Garrow book I just talked about, there's a confrontation between Garrow and his Primarch, who's now changed. He is in his demon form, and Garrow is just like constantly calling him out like every other page.
Yeah.
It is just hilarious. You did this and you did this, and Mortarion's just like, he's silent because he has no response to any of this stuff.
Yep, exactly.
He's just such a loser, man. Oh my gosh. Crazy.
Okay. Our next one here, we have Blood for My God, and your options were World Eaters and Blood Angels, and I certainly agree with those two choices.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you want to go into more of those, or just this pretty much surface level? Or
I think the Blood Angels, it's interesting because the more you learn about them, and I think what's interesting is the Siege books actually give you a lot of backstory that I think a lot of the other Heresy books don't give you about the Blood Angels. Like it's almost like their origin story, and you realize what they were before they became Sanguinius's angels. And man, they are just. We know about the rage and the black rage and the curse that they have. We know about that. But man, they are just some bloodthirsty dudes. Like,
yeah, they're into it more than any good guy should be into it. Which makes them fun. I mean, not compelling as heroes, of course, but
yeah. And
yeah.
You think about the Flesh Terrors. I mean, those guys are just the epitome of what they're kind of like, this vestigial organ, that's just hung around.
Yes.
And
yep.
They're what the Blood Angels used to be. And then you go to the World Eaters, who it's very obvious. I mean, it's just out there how bloodthirsty they are. It doesn't matter from where the blood flows or where the skulls come from or whatever. It's just so they're a lot more
for sure. But, for listeners who don't know, the Flesh Terrors are a chapter that was born out of the Blood. Yeah, successor. That's what I was looking for. Yep. Chapter that was made. And if I was going to use the GW paint scheme spectrum to describe them, I'm going to say they're somewhere between Mephiston Red and Corn Red, which makes perfect sense given between Blood Angels and World Eaters. But
oh man,
just a shade in the wrong direction.
Yeah. In fact, I think there's a new. I'm going to talk about it on our show my show this week. There's a new Flesh Terrors novel coming out.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, that'll be interesting for fans of that.
I might check that out because when I was in Seattle, there was a big buzz because there was a guy who meticulously painted this entire Flesh Terrors army that looked terrific. It was just so good.
Oh, that's so cool.
Okay, for our next entry, we have the Heresy Zealots. So now we're getting back into DW's question here. Word Bearers and Imperial Fists are what you have here.
Right.
Do I add something? Let's see.
What are you?
No, I didn't. I was cool with those answers. That's pretty much, those are the big ones, I think. And in this, I wanted to ask, are Imperial Fists, in your mind, zealots of the Imperial truth?
Yeah, I think, Dorn is so, just so determined to not deviate at all. Obviously the Imperial Fists are very effective as a legion. They're very efficient, but they just blindly follow anything the Emperor says. And when you read the Siege books, you realize that he is so blindly locked into the way he does things that it actually causes the uh, loyalists to lose the war, start losing the war and losing the siege, because his plans are so locked in. And it actually took other loyalist primarchs who used unorthodox tactics to fight the traitors that made it more of an even battle. And Dorn, you get this feeling as you're reading through the siege books, just going, you just picture him sitting up in one of his towers, watching what's happening with this really morose inevitability, just kind of the shroud of it over him. And you see these other primarchs going to do things, or other characters going to do things. And the reason it's like that is because he wouldn't be flexible. I mean, even there's a Garrow story where he had locked up his own librarians, literally locked them up. He didn't just, send them back into the battle line like most of the legions did, to just be a Marine. He literally locked them up in this non-psychic cell, and they were just sitting there because, they're good Space Marines and they obey their Primarch. And Garrow was just looking at this like, what is this?
I love it. I love that little lore tidbit. Like, everybody else redistributed their troops and spread them out, and Dorn's just like, oh, you nerds like being in the library? He just locks the door. They're all inside.
Horrible. But that's Dorn. That's just one of your favorite scenes with the Garrow book.
Yes.
Eisenstein is when he just smacks Garrow around like, how dare you say anything against it's not possible for whatever.
I love it. I love it so much.
Yeah.
That's a great call out. Yeah, it's interesting because Zealot has a very interesting connotation, because we could look at, say, the Black Templars, which are a successor of the Imperial Fist, and say those are Zealots. Yes.
And now you just called out a perfect example. That is where they came from, was Dorn.
Yeah,
they were born of Dorn, they are. Yeah.
I wouldn't say that the Imperial Fists are necessarily the same level of zealotry, but it's the same inflexibility of their mindset that it might as well be. As much as faith to the word bearers is, it doesn't matter. This is the truth, but we're doing it.
Well, and I think, you actually called out a better parallel, but I think, Templars, the Black Templars are really a 40K thing, because they came after the Heresy. But in terms of their zealotry, they are definitely on par with the word bearers. The Emperor, it's all about the Emperor and the imperial truth and worshiping the Emperor and all that stuff. No less, Sigismund and the creators of the Black Templars are no less crazy about their beliefs than Lorgar is about his. So that's great. Great call.
Absolutely. You had 2 here for tribal heritage, which I actually added a 3rd, but you have Space Wolves and White Scars.
And you added...
I actually added the Iron Hands, I believe. Let me just double check. Mm-hmm. Yes, Iron Hands. Now, I'll get into why I added those 2, but tell me what kind of... Were you just thinking of surface level, how they function and organize?
Well, and I think it has to do with their basic culture. I mean, the culture of the planets they come from, their home planets. And I don't think there's any other legions. Those are the ones that pop out to me. And Iron Hands, certainly, and I understand because I know the lore of the Iron Hands. But you think about the Space Wolves, they didn't change Fenris. They didn't come to the planet and make it this imperial planet and create hive cities. And they just let Fenris be Fenris. And what was it? It was literally Vikings on this. It was a planet of Vikings, and it was a bunch of tribal communities that fought against each other and were in competition and survived on this death planet. White Scars wasn't a death planet per se, but again, the Khan literally built his the Legion Fortress way out of the way of the people. So it was not even apparent that it was there, because he wanted to preserve that. I guess the closest, I think we're supposed to think that the closest real world thing would be the Mongols, that has that model. And so he wanted to keep that tribal type of society to feed into. Again, he didn't allow the Imperium in, neither did the Space Wolves. Even in the 40th millennium, they're both incredibly independent chapters, and they will broach no interference from the Imperium, which I think is really, really cool.
Yeah. And I have no objections to either of those. I mean, they definitely look the part. But one I wanted to give an honorable mention to was the Iron Hands. Now,
Yes.
if you are not familiar, Iron Hands are mostly known for like being related to the Mechanicum, which is about as far as you can get away from tribal culture as you can just about imagine. But here's the thing about the Iron Hands is that when Ferrus Manus set up their legion, when he took over, he structured it as his primitive clans did back on his homeworld.
Yes.
And that's why I really like this idea of, if you're not familiar, if you haven't read anything with the Iron Hands or any of their little supplements, they have like a Clan Raucan supplement that came out years ago. Essentially, all their companies are individual self-contained army clans. One of those is Clan Raucan. And as your company does well, you get access to the next wave of weapons and armor and stuff, like you upgrade. And because of their warrior culture, the people who are doing the worst, meaning they have the worst equipment, are just excited to get into war. And so they have this like whole societal carrots and sticks to make these very primitive clans act like Space Marines. It's very cool. I like that a lot. And less so than like, I guess, the outward appearance of a tribal culture. I feel like they really took the step of like integrating it with modern warfare and technology. And so they almost remind me of like Khan from Star Trek, of like this guy out of his own time bringing primal tactics to a modern, whatever. I love it. So I wanted to throw those guys in because of the clan structure that they have, which I thought was really cool.
Yes, I think that's a great call. Yeah, good.
Next up, we have the Shadow Warriors. And you put down Alpha Legion and Raven Guard. I can't think of any. For some reason, I was thinking there was another sneaky one. Maybe Night Lords, maybe, but they don't really start sneaky. They're scary.
Well, they're all about terror. They're all about like, we're here and we're gonna. Yeah.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, they're only sneaky as long as it takes to show you some guy's face they just ripped off or something.
Oh, bad stuff. Yeah. I really enjoy the Alpha Legion as well. I think that there's still argument that can be made of whether or not they're truly traitors.
Yeah.
I think that still exists now. And even there was several novels have been written about them, and most of them have been written about the Alpha Legion Marines who, as hundreds of thousands of others did in other legions, never went over to Horus's side.
Right.
Now, one of the things I think is important to understand too is the Alpha Legion never went to Chaos.
No.
They have never bought into Chaos Gods or any of that stuff. And I don't know about you, but I can't think of another traitor legion that hasn't gone to the Chaos Gods. Can you?
I mean, Night Lords in the Aaron Dembski Bowden series did their own thing for a long time.
Okay,
but it is a rarity. I mean, to have Chaos Legions that just didn't want the yoke of the Imperium, but also didn't want Chaos Gods, like that makes them unique for sure.
Yeah, and again, they're heresy because they sided with Horus, but they're not Chaos.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing.
Yeah.
So we'll get to some of their books here soon. I'm very excited to talk about Alpha Legion because they're one of those legions that, like, if you read like their Wikipedia page, you're like, okay, so they're the sneaky ones. But then, kind of like with Prospero Burns, you need that perspective of like, what does that look like in action? And I like their books for that.
I think Alfarius's Primarch book is so good.
Really,
it really, really demonstrates who he was and why his legion was what it was.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody who can sneak into the Imperial Palace, it's like, holy crap, man.
I know. Yeah.
That's good.
I love it.
Yeah, so so Alpha Legion for sure. And I think most people know about the Raven Guard, but they're kind of, their culture is stealth. I mean, they've fought in open battles before, but their preference in most of the stories you read about them are using stealth and using subterfuge to win battles before they're even fought. I think in a lot of ways, kind of like the Alpha Legion does.
Yeah.
Just in a little bit different way. And obviously they're loyalists. They fought on the loyalist side.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely. I think we should do the same thing again, but talk about like their battle tactics. Because to me, that's where Alpha Legion is so interesting. When deception becomes a wartime strategy, it's really cool. They're really fun.
And I think that's a really good thing. Like with White Scars, I finally listened to the Khan's Primarch book. And when you talk about tactics, they were building him his fleet. When he first became the Primarch and he met the Emperor, and he basically went to the shipyards and said, stop everything you're doing. These ships are all wrong.
Yep.
And he handed them a new set of plans and said, this is what you're going to build for me, because this is what I want my Legion to be.
Yeah.
Just like you said about the Alpha Legion, they had their way of doing things. And almost every Legion did. So I think that actually would be a great discussion. Yeah, that's a great one.
Let's do it. Okay. So next we have the Heresy poster boys, and you put Sons of Horus and Ultramarines. And I'm kind of curious, why Ultramarines and not Imperial Fists?
Yeah, because I think it carries over from, and we are talking Heresy here, right. But I think that the Ultramarines and Guilliman kind of represent more of a wide range of the stories and more wide range involvement in the Heresy than the Imperial Fist do. And so I just think that they are more representative of a wider range of, and everybody, I think, compares themselves to the Ultramarines in a lot of ways when you read the stories. Like, oh, the Ultramarines do this, or they're doing this, and they always mention the Ultramarines doing things. They're over here doing this, or they should be here, or you're always hearing references to them.
Right.
From the Imperial side. Or even Horus's guys are like, oh, where are the Ultramarines? Where are the Ultramarines? What are they doing? They're not worried about the Imperial Fist, like, where are the Ultramarines? So it seems, at least on the loyalist side, that's what happens. But I also think in the books a lot of times there's reference to Horus's guys.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Everybody is referencing not only the War Master, but the Sons of Horus have representatives in the other legions in a lot of the books.
Well, I mean, we know at least every Traitor Legion would probably have like an ambassador or at least a contact point or something. Yeah, they would be everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, that's how the Mechanicum got involved, is Horus sent one of his dudes to Mars.
Yes.
To corrupt the Fabricator General. And so those two make sense to me. Do you have any thoughts on those? Or
no, my only thought was instead of Sons of Horus, instead of Ultramarines being Imperial Fist, but they really are the poster boys from the current Horus Heresy marketing perspective from Games Workshop. Like, they're always paired. Whenever you see a new tank come out, it's always Sons of Horus colors or Imperial Fist, it feels like. So that's why I wanted to clarify and ask. I feel like
that's a good point from the model perspective and the hobby perspective. Yes.
Yeah. And
that makes sense.
I just asked because it's pretty clear that Ultramarines are that in 40K, and I think they just wanted to distinguish the lines a little bit, so they picked a new favorite.
Absolutely.
So
that's good.
The next one you have here is interesting. So it says, for humanity and for vanity. And for your legions, you had salamanders and emperor's children. Now, yes. I don't know much about the salamanders. Are they vain as well?
No. So the humanity one is for the salamanders, and the vanity one is for the emperor's children.
Oh, okay. I was man, I'm not seeing this pairing.
Because the salamanders really, from the beginning, have always pledged to protect humanity. Like, that is their thing. Right. It's not even to fight chaos or fight Horus or whatever else it is. It's, we are here to protect mankind.
Yes.
That's what our Legion does. And that is so noble
of the setting.
And it's unique. I think it's unique in terms of all the legions. But in terms of the Loyalist legions too, there is no doubt what the Salamanders stand for and what their priority is in terms of, the actions they take in various stories and in battles and things like that. It's always about protecting people and reducing casualties of civilians. So, Emperor's Children is pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Vanity. You look at their ships, just the description of their ships.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Give me a sec here.
Fulgrim just it's like they were I don't know what it is, but it's like that legion was just primed, Doug, for just stepping into this prima donna role.
Yeah.
Just
absolutely.
It just fit them so well.
Well, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, because I didn't see that they were separate things, I actually changed this to craftsmen, because I do know that the Salamanders are all about craftsmanship with their weapons, like very ornate relic weapons.
Yeah.
And the Emperor's Children are too, but not so much for the quality of the weapon, but more the artistic expressionism that it gives them, like fancy, looking swords and stuff. I like that. I mean, there's some great, I don't know. I've never seen anything that has those two legions fighting, and I would love to now. Just knowing how the Salamanders are kind of feared and stuff for their looks and appearance.
Yes.
I don't know. That's a great fold there between the two. And then the last couple you have here are Sons of the Warp. You put 1,000 Suns there.
Yes.
And I actually I threw down Blood Angels. Actually, for the next two here, they're a very interesting Loyalist chapter because they have so many flaws, but are also so morally above board. I think more so than Space Wolves, and I'm trying to think what other good guys have flaws, that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Like they're good.
Yeah. You're talking about Blood Angels.
Yeah. So as far as the Sons of the Warp go, they have a lot of premonition powers. Each one of the Blood Angels is eventually affected by a psychic kind of disease, the Red Thirst and then the Black Rage.
Yes.
And I find that compelling. And then your last one here, you put Terror in the Dark, which is Night Lords. I mean, no one else uses fear like Night Lords use fear as a weapon.
No.
But the one that I wanted to add was Fatalism, because I think that there's a great discussion to be had regarding Conrad Kurz and the leader of the Blood Angels, Sanguinius. So if you're not familiar, they both have like premonition. They can see the future in certain ways. Yep. Kurz took that in a very dark path. Think murderous Batman with a little bit of foresight, and then Sanguinius took that in the opposite, which is like duty and honor and all these kinds of things. And seeing the same gift across two different Primarchs. I mean, more Primarchs have this ability, like Magnus, for example. But it's fascinating to see how they turned out.
Well, and I think that's a really good point you make. Both of them actually saw their own deaths. Because Kurz saw his own death, and Sanguinius saw his own death.
Yeah.
And none of the other Primarchs, to your point, ever really are talked about having that happen to them, and having that be a fate that they continually see this path that you're just moving inevitably towards that.
Yeah, and it messes with them. I mean, because those two Primarchs get into some of the most ridiculous antics, from founding a second Imperium to ripping faces off and wearing them like outfits to, it's just like weird levels of stuff.
Oh, that whole confrontation between Kurz and Sanguinius in the what is the book again? You remind me, the Undiscovered.
Unremembered Empire.
Unremembered Empire. Yeah, just when Kurz kind of just shows up in the throne room.
Yeah. Yes.
He's almost taunting us, Sanguinius, and Sanguinius, being the guy he is, he kind of just sits there and has a conversation with him while he's trying to, goad him into doing something. But when you you bring this point up, they both had a lot of those similar outlooks, and they're sitting there having a conversation with each other. It was pretty cool, actually, that confrontation took place. So,
yeah, absolutely. So, those are our heresy buddies, our matching and my little interrupts there. But thank you so much for sending that, Dan. That was super fun to go through and just kind of think about the comparing and contrasting them all.
Sure, no problem. That's a lot of fun.
At this point, I wanted to ask, what do we want to cover next?
Well, you can edit this out, so edit break.
Yep,
here.
I just wrote it down.
I don't know why. Did we cover First Heretic already?
First Heretic. I don't think so. With
Lorgar, your guy Lorgar.
No, I don't think so.
I think that might be a great book to talk about. I don't know. The story's just so magnificent, and it certainly has, obviously, it has the same kind of an impact as some of the earlier books in terms of giving us, context for everything else that happens.
Yeah, I'm here for it. Let's do it. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so whenever you're ready to go back, I just wanted to throw that one out. Mm-hmm. So, in terms of ideas, I don't know that we might want to cover First Heretic, which is Lorgar and the Word Bearers fall to chaos and their journey. And I think there are a lot of compelling characters dug in that story.
Yeah. Absolutely. Let's do it.
Argel Tal and others who have an impact in just seeing a legion. It was a different kind of fall to chaos too, I think. Then
yes,
it was very unique story and how they turned.
Yeah, man, let's do it. Okay, I'm excited to talk about some word bearers.
Okay, yeah, of course. Lorgar's your guy, man.
He is kind of my guy. I'm painting Sons of Horus, but Lorgar is definitely my spirit animal when it comes to primarchs.
Okay.
The problem is, though, his model, I don't care for his model.
Sure.
He looks like he's standing around waiting for the bus.
Yeah, well, there is that. Yeah. Coolio.
So, okay. Well, let's go ahead and close out the show. Like I said, if you want to get a hold of us, you can contact me through my Discord, YouTube channel, and Dan through his podcast, all of which are in the show notes. Thank you so much to everyone for listening, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts regarding our hot takes today. And we're excited to get back into book coverage next time we join. Any other final words for you, Dan?
No, I think that's it, buddy. Thanks a lot for going through this. It was a lot of fun to put it together. And
well, thank you so much, everyone, and we'll catch you next time. May the Emperor protect.